They said 60 days for this to take effect, correct? But none of this happens without a judge's approval.
That's correct. This whole thing is based on what's called the Flores settlement agreement. It's a landmark case that governs the entire country's housing and welfare for unaccompanied migrant children, and also for families that are apprehended, migrant families that are apprehended with children. And the settlement is under court order. So before you can do anything to change it, the judge who oversees that settlement has to approve it. And one of the things that she's going to look for is, does this new rule actually meet the standards, the very labyrinthine standards of the original agreement from 22 years ago?
So, Camilo, we heard a lot of talk about families, but not very much about unaccompanied minors. What is the plan for unaccompanied minors?
Right. So, you know, as Graham mentioned, this agreement, which has been in place for over 2 decades now, has really governed the way the government is supposed to care for children in its custody. It was first just for unaccompanied migrant children, Anne-Marie, but then a judge in 2015 expanded that to children who came to the border with parents or other legal guardians, so families with children. So this will impact both populations, unaccompanied migrant children and children within family units, right? It will give the government more leeway to detain migrant children which are detained by ICE for more than 20 days. That is the limit that a judge effectively set during a more recent court ruling surrounding the Flores litigation. So advocates fear, right, that this will lead inevitably to indefinite detention of migrant families until the court proceedings are finished. But a DHS official told us that this is not the purpose of the regulation. The purpose of the regulation, as they believe, is to close some loopholes and curtail the incentive that they believe migrant families have to come to the U.S. If you come here with the child, you will be released after a couple of days because of this Flores agreement. So that is the main sticking point between the government and immigrant advocates.
Graham, CBS News spoke to one of the attorneys representing some of these unaccompanied children in the Flores case. What is their next action in this?
They're definitely going to pursue litigation in this, but they know that this can't move forward at all without it going to the court. And in fact, the DHS secretary said as much. The whole point of the agreement is every single change has to be approved by a court. So while they're saying this is going to be implemented in 60 days, we all know how it works with litigation. There's a really good chance that this is going to go on for some time. We could see, no matter what the decision is from the first judge, we're going to see it appeal to the Ninth Circuit. So we're still a long way away from seeing this implemented, in particular because they're trying to set up an entirely new regulatory regime across the country.
So, Chip, you know, the Trump administration has received a healthy amount of criticism about the way particularly unaccompanied minors have been treated and housed. The focus of this announcement seemed to be mostly families and sort of the not luxury digs, but the better quality digs. Yeah, that families would be staying in. But you got to wonder about the timing. What is the administration saying about why they're unveiling this sweeping new plan now?
Is that addressed to me? I think
yes,
you
Chip,
said
that's
my name
for you.
there.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, well, this is something they've been working on for quite some time. In fact, there have been people considered for jobs in this administration who the president didn't think moved quickly enough on this issue, whose names were withdrawn from consideration. This is something he believes, and the secretary apparently believes, will help eliminate that whole catch and release idea, that families come here and because of this 20-day limit, they're put back in society, and then in some cases disappear and blend into American society. A lot of people would say that's great. They do well, they get jobs, but the Trump administration obviously does not want that to happen. And they believe that that will help eliminate this. But the reason it's happening now, they simply say, is because this crush of people coming across the border illegally is just unsustainable at this point. But on the issue of timing, and I don't know if you discussed this already, you probably did, this could be a long town hall, if this ever actually does take effect. It's not supposed to take effect for another 60 days. They are well aware it's going to be subject to numerous lawsuits. There's no guarantee that they're going to win these lawsuits, and even if they eventually do, it could take months or even years, as we've seen with so many other Trump administration proposals on immigration.
Chip, everything this election year is informed by politics. So do you think part of this is to at least look like you're trying to move past these bad optics of the kids in cages and say, look, we're trying to do something here. We can't help it if the court doesn't agree with it, but we're trying to put them in a much nicer living conditions here?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of politics involved in this. They do want to get away from the idea that they are heartless in just putting kids in cages, and they want to change the message here. They want to say we're treating them very well. We're keeping families together. We're giving them 3 hot meals a day and soccer fields and everything else they could possibly want. Family suites. The question I asked, I've talked to a couple of immigration advocates who have said they think that the issue of ending the 20-day rule may get lost in all the information here, and that what many families will hear is simply, wow, we're going to be treated beautifully. This is the time to go. So there is a possibility that this will have the reverse effect of what the Secretary hopes it will do.
Yeah, that's what I sort of wondered about. And the other thing that we learned is that in terms of catch and release, that's actually taking place now as well. That's sort of not the message that the Trump administration wants to deliver to its supporters. But what we are hearing is we're going to spend a lot more money. And also, by the way, there are thousands of families who are not being detained, who are sort of given bracelets or whatever and being asked to, turn back up again at the right time.
McAleenan didn't mention the 20-day. He kept talking about the 50-day. 50-day is the goal. 50-day was the ideal years ago during the Obama administration, and we're going to try to get back to that. Yeah. And that kind of, I think Chip's right, that kind of slipped in there quietly with all the, we have, 3 beds and a jacuzzi kind of talk that they have there. So.
Right.
All right, I was facetious there.
So I guess
exaggeration.
Yes, a little bit.
Part of what I wanted to ask you about is exactly how is the system working now? Because catch and release, that phrase was something that the Trump administration criticized the Obama administration for, but clearly that's part of their solution as well.
Yeah, so right now we only have about 3,000 beds across the country for members of families that are apprehended. And as they've noted, there are way more that get apprehended. Right. And they're typically released either with ankle monitors or just appointments to attend their next court date. And the vast majority do, in fact, do that.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, there was one stat that we talked about during this press conference that I think is worth mentioning again. He gave out the number of 475,000 family units apprehended, and then he was talking about how they do DNA tests to try to see, is it fraudulent? Are these real family members, or are they trying to slip? And he said, we've caught 6,000 family units that had fraudulent DNA. You made the point, well, there are family members who don't necessarily share the same DNA.
Right.
But I find that number minuscule, 6,000 compared to 475,000 family units. Yeah. Camilo, what do you think about that?
Right, it is very minuscule, and picking up on what you and Anne-Marie were talking about is whether this is going to have the deterrent effect that the administration hopes for, because as we know, when they implemented the zero tolerance policy to separate migrant children from their parent or legal guardians near the border last summer, the numbers continued to skyrocket, and they hit a record high for migrant families this May of this year. So the family separation policy, even though it was rescinded after a couple of months, did not work as a deterrence policy. And as Chip mentioned, there's no telling whether this one will work as well.
Well, we know there's going to be a lot of legal wrangling before we see any changes at all. Chip, Graham, Camilo, thank you so much.